Hey everybody, welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani, and we are live tonight on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all the places. And we are continuing forward with our book club. Now, for those of you who are joining me for the very first time, first of all, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you hang around and subscribe. Um, but basically, we are a book club that picks spiritual books from all different paths. And we read these books together and we kind of talk it out in the chat and on video. Um, and you're invited. Now, up to this point, we have chosen to do the Alan Kardec Codex series, this, and it's like a book of, there's like five in the series, but we are only focusing on the first three books. Now, we've already read the first book, which is the Spirits book. We've already read the second book, which is the Mediums book. And now we are on the third book, the Gospel According to Spiritism. Please keep in mind that even if you were not there for the first two books, you can still join us. This information is just wonderful to talk about and to kind of, think about things a little bit bigger. But if you want to catch up, by all means, just go to my YouTube channel at The Magical Solution to watch the previous episodes. So we are on chapter 17 of the Gospel According to Spiritism, and chapter 17 is entitled Be Perfect. And the subcategories of chapter 17, Be Perfect, are the characteristics of perfection, moral persons, good spiritists, parable of the sower, and then, of course, the Spirit's teachings, which break down duty, virtue, superiors and subordinates, the individual in the world, and caring for the body and spirit. Woo! So tonight is going to be very meaty. Now, again, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, just know that I usually will read until the chapter is over, and then we'll dedicate like 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or however long we need to answer questions. I will be giving my commentary throughout the entire time, but feel free to drop comments, questions throughout the entire live, okay? Now, the Gospel According to Spiritism, in case you don't know what that is, in the context of the entire series, it is Spiritism's interpretation of Gospels, biblical texts, if you will, and specifically what Jesus said, like mostly what Jesus is saying, and using those passages to not only support Spiritism, but to kind of give Spiritism's take as to why these passages would be applied in these stories. Okay? So knowing that information, we're going to be quoting some biblical stuff throughout the entire live. Ooh, child. Sorry, I disconnected my phone and I don't want you guys to die on me. There we go. So here we go. The characteristics of perfection. We are going to be quoting Matthew 5, verse 44, 46 through 48. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you and pray for those who persecute and slander you. For if you love only those who love you, what reward will you have? Do not the publicans do the same? If you greet only your brothers, what are you doing that is more than what others do? Do not the pagans also do the same? Therefore, be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Okay, so let's talk about this from the perspective of Spiritism. What they're talking about here is that since God possesses infinite perfection in all things, the maxim, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect, if taken literally, would presuppose the possibility of attaining absolute perfection. If it were given to the creature to be as perfect as the Creator, the former would become equal to the latter, which is inadmissible. However, The people to whom Jesus spoke would not have understood this nuance. He limited himself to presenting them with a model and told them to put forth the effort to emulate it. One must therefore understand these words to mean a relative perfection, which humanity is able to achieve and which brings it closest to divinity. What does such perfection consist of? Jesus told us to love our enemies, do good to those who hate us, and pray for those who persecute us. So, in this way, he shows that the essence of perfection is charity in its broadest definition because it entails the practice of all the other virtues. In fact, by observing the results of all vices and even the simplest defects, one will realize that there is not one of them that does not alter the sentiment of charity to some degree, because they all have their origin in selfishness and pride, which are the negation of charity. This is because everything that overexcites the sentiment and personality destroys or at least weakens the elements of true charity: benevolence, indulgence, self denial, and devotion. Love for one's neighbor, taken so far as to loving one's enemies, cannot ally itself with any defect contrary to charity, and therefore is always an indication of a greater or lesser moral ascendancy. Hence, it follows that the degree of perfection is in direct proportion to the range of such love. And this is why Jesus, after having given his disciples the guidelines of the most sublime charity, said to them, therefore, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Now, let's break that down a little bit. What Spiritism is sort of saying from this biblical quote here is that to really be present in the art of charity, okay, you must have unconditional love. Meaning, loving your neighbor is one thing, right? Loving your friends and family is one thing. To Spiritism, that's easy. It's loving your neighbor. It's wishing them well and praying for them. It's assisting them in their ascension. It's the act of forgiveness. There's so many things that contribute to this idea of perfection in charity according to Spiritism, and the degree to which you challenge yourself is the degree of perfection, is equal to the degree of progression and perfection that you are aiming towards. Okay. Now, okay, so we're in the 21st century, you guys. Let's be real. You do not want to put yourself in dangerous situations. You do not want to, there are some really big threats out in the world these days. And I'm not saying that they haven't always existed, but it's definitely one of those things where be smart. Be smart. You can be very charitable to strangers. You can be forgiving to people who have done you wrong, but do not hold tight to a rose bush, right? If you know that something is actively toxic, if you know something is actively hurting you or threatening your existence in any type of way, you must let that go. You must not look at that as some sort of like challenge or sacrament or sacrifice that you are putting yourself through in order to reach a certain type of progression or perfection. That is simply ludicrous and it's dangerous. So please don't do that. But what they are saying is challenge yourself. You know what I mean? Challenge yourself, get outside of your comfort zone, meet people, don't be afraid of strangers. Help where you can. This isn't, love unconditionally, meaning, allow people to be who they are, facilitate space for that, and, be and let be, right? So that's what they're really trying to say here. So now the second category is entitled moral persons. Okay, now Spiritism says that truly moral persons are those who practice the law of justice, love, and charity in its greatest purity. If they question their conscience about their actions, they will ask themselves if they have violated this law. If they have committed any wrongdoing, if they have done all the good they could do, if they have willingly disregarded any opportunity to be useful, if anyone might have a complaint about them, and lastly, if they have done unto others everything that they would like have done unto themselves. They have faith in God and God's goodness, justice, and wisdom. They know that nothing happens without God's permission, so they submit to the divine will in everything. They have faith in the future, thus they place spiritual possessions above temporal ones. They know that all vicissitudes of life, all its sorrows, and all its disappointments are trials or expiations, that they accept them without complaining. Persons imbued with this sentiment of charity and love for their neighbor do the good for its own sake without expecting anything in return, and they repay evil with good. They defend the weak against the strong and always sacrifice their own interests to the interests of justice. They find satisfaction in the benefits that they spread around, the service that they render, the happiness that they promote, the tears that they dry, and the consolation they provide to the afflicted. Their first impulse is to think of others before thinking of themselves, and to attend to the interest of others before their own. The selfish, on the other hand, calculate the profits and the losses entailed in every generous act. Moral persons are kind, humane, and benevolent towards all, regardless of race or creed, because they regard all people as their brothers and sisters. They respect all sincere convictions that others might hold to, and they do not anathematize those who do not think like they do. So, it keeps going. Sorry, I was going to interpret that, but we'll keep going. In all circumstances, charity is their guide. They tell themselves that those who harm others with malevolent words, or who hurt others' feelings with their pride and disdain, who do not recoil from the idea of causing suffering or difficulty, however slight, when it would be avoided, fail in their duty of love for their neighbor and do not deserve the Lord's clemency. They hold no hatred or rancor or desire for vengeance. Following Jesus' example, they forgive and forget offenses and remember only good deeds, because they know that they will be forgiven according to how they themselves have forgiven. They are indulgent towards others' weaknesses, for they know that they themselves need indulgence, and they recall these words of Christ: "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." They never take pleasure in searching for deficits in others or in calling attention to them. If necessity forces them to do so, they always look for the good that might mitigate that evil. They study their own imperfections and strive incessantly to combat them. All their efforts are focused on being able to say to themselves tomorrow that they are better than they were yesterday. They do not seek to exalt their spirit or talents at the expense of others. Instead, they seize every opportunity to point out what is praiseworthy in another person. They do not gloat over their wealth or their personal advantages, for they know that everything that has been given to them can also be taken away. They use, but they do not abuse the possessions that have been accorded to them, for they know that it is a trust for which they will have to render an accounting, and that the worst use of it in regards to themselves would be to use it to satisfy their own passions. If the social order has placed others under their tutelage, they treat them with kindness and benevolence because they are their equals before God. They use their authority to lift their moral and not to squash them with their pride. They avoid anything that could render their subordinate's position more painful. Those who are subordinate, on the other hand, understand the duties of their position and are scrupulous and consciously fulfilling them. And finally, moral persons respect in their fellow beings all the rights arising from the laws of nature in the same way they wish their own to be respected. That is not a list of all qualities that define moral persons, but whoever makes an effort to possess them is on the road that leads to all the others. So this particular, subcategory is describing what a morally perfect person is, what a perfect or someone who is on the path to progression and to perfection. And obviously they described all the things that these are people who are in alignment with justice and charity and love and light and all that stuff. But there's also a lot of self-sacrifice here, and not in the way that puts you in danger, puts you out of your comfort, puts you at a loss. It's never really about that. It's not about sacrificing to your own detriment. It's about filling your cup so that it overfloweth, so that you can give. Right? And in that giving, there is a sacrifice happening, right? So just keep that in mind. That was basically, oh shoot, did I lose it? Okay. And then of course they talk about, non-judgment and things like that. You're not doing this to get into heaven. You're not doing this to boast about your spirituality. You're not doing this for any recognition or talent. You are doing this out of service, and service is the ultimate form of charity, and charity is one of the closest ways that we can progress in our spiritual path. So now we're going to get into the subcategory of good spiritists, right? Okay. So Spiritism, when it's well understood, but especially when well felt, inevitably leads to the results listed above, which characterize the true Spiritist as well as the true Christian, for they are one and the same. Pause. Please keep in mind of when this was written and who it was written by and where it was written, right? So Spiritists and Christianity were kind of doing their thing. Sometimes it intermingled, but we know as time spread to all different types of religious practices. Spiritism does not create a new morality. It only makes it easier for people to understand and practice the morality of Christ by providing an unshakable and enlightened faith to those who doubt or waver. Nonetheless, many of those who believe in spirit manifestations understand neither their consequences nor their moral implications, or if they do not apply them to themselves. To what may this be attributed? To a lack of precision in the doctrine? No, because the doctrine contains no allegories or symbols that could give way to an erroneous interpretation. Clarity is its very essence, and that is what makes it powerful, for it goes directly to one's intelligence. It contains nothing mysterious, and its adherents do not possess any secret that is hidden from ordinary people. Thus, is an exceptional intelligence needed to understand it? No, since one sees individuals with notable capacities who do not comprehend it, while average minds, even young people who have barely left adolescence, understand its most subtle nuances with admirable precision. This derives from the fact that somewhat material aspect of spiritist science requires only eyes to observe, whereas the essential aspect requires a certain degree of sensibility, which one might call maturity of the moral sense. Regardless of age and level of education, it is particularly inherent to the development of the incarnate spirit. In some, the material ties are still too tenacious to allow the spirit to disengage itself from the things of the world, because the fog that envelopes them obscures their vision of the infinite. And consequently, they do not easily break with their tastes or their habits, as they do not understand anything better than what they have. The belief in spirits is for them a simple fact, but it does nothing or very little to change their instinctive tendencies. In other words, they see only a ray of light, insufficient to guide them and endow them with a powerful aspiration capable of overcoming their inclinations. These persons are much more interested in the phenomenon than the morality. Sorry, I don't know where it went. Yeah. More interested in the phenomenon than the morality, which seems banal and monotonous, right? They incessantly demand that spirits introduce them to new mysteries, without asking if they are worthy of grasping the secrets of the Creator. These individuals are imperfect spiritists, some remaining stationary or distancing themselves from their brothers and sisters in faith, recoiling at the obligation of reforming themselves, or otherwise reserving their sympathies for those who share their weaknesses or prejudices. Nevertheless, acceptance of the principle of the doctrine is a first step that will make the second easier in a future existence. Those who may rightfully be regarded as true and sincere spiritists are at a higher degree of moral advancement. Their spirit dominates matter more completely, thus gives them a clearer perception of the future. The principles of the doctrine make fibers vibrate within them that remain dormant in the former person. In short, their heartstrings are touched. Therefore, their faith is unshakable. Some are like the musician who is moved by certain chords when others hear only sounds. True spiritists are recognized by their moral transformation and the efforts they make to overcome their bad inclinations. While the former are content with their limited horizon, the latter understand that there is something better. They make the effort to free themselves, and they always reach their goal if they maintain a firm will. So here we go with the Kardashian elitism, right? We see this a lot in the Spiritist movement. There is, as Spiritism kind of moved across the globe, one of the things that always kind of rang true to everyone, and I think it's because it's a leftover side effects of Christian Catholicism, is this idea of being better than those who are not spiritists, right? Those who are not Christian, those who are not Catholic, right? So there's this sense of, well, Spiritism has a higher moral and intellectual spirit, and this is why, we're better. And so please understand that sort of frame of thought is very much leftover. And it also caters to the people that they are trying to speak to at this time. They are trying to speak to Christians. They are trying to speak to Catholics at this time. So they need to use similar language. But we know now that Spiritism, literally anyone can work on their own progress. Anyone can utilize their spirits to help in their spiritual progress. Anyone. The only difference is that, we're all on different paths and we're all at different levels and degrees of our progression. And that's just going to be a fact. You're going to see more people who are more spiritually progressed than others and who have abilities and certain, consequences of that usually manifest as supernatural gifts, right? But there's no need to be jealous of that. There's no need to be discouraged with yourself. To each his own time, right? You just have to respect where you are in your path and move forward from there. And don't be afraid to ask for help. So now we get into the next subcategory, which is the parable of the sower. So they're going to quote a little bit more of Matthew here. They're going to quote, yeah, basically some more Matthew, and then they're going to try to interpret it. So here we go. On the same day, Jesus, having left the house, sat down close to the sea, and a large crowd of people gathered around him. Therefore, he climbed into a boat and sat down while the people remained on the shore. He then told them many things in parables, speaking to them in this way. A sower went out to sow, and as he was sowing, some of the seeds fell by the wayside, and the birds of the sky came and ate them. Other seeds fell upon stony places where there was not much earth. They soon sprouted because the soil was not very deep. But when the sun came up, it scorched them, and since they had no roots, they withered. Still other seeds fell among thorns, and when they began to grow, the thorns choked them. And finally, some seeds fell on good ground and produced a crop, some rendering 100 to 1, others 60, others 30. He who has ears, let him hear. Hear therefore the parable of the sower. Whoever hears the word of the kingdom does not heed it, the evil spirit comes and takes away what he had been sown in his heart. This is the one who received the seeds by the wayside. He who has received the seeds among the stones, if the one who hears the word and receives it joyously as soon as he hears it, but he has no roots in himself, and it lasts only for a little while, and when obstacles and persecutions on account of the word overcome him, he soon regards it as an object of offense and ruin. He who receives a seed among the thorns is the one who hears the word, but then the cares of the time and the illusions of riches choke the word within him, rendering it unfruitful. But he who receives the seed on good soil is the one who hears the word, who heeds it, and who produces a crop rendering 100 or 60 or 30 to 1. Okay, let's see what he has to say about this, right? So the parable of the sower perfectly represents the nuances that exist in the ways one profits from the teachings of the gospel. How many people there are, in fact, for whom the gospel teachings are only a dead letter, which, like the seeds that have fallen on the stony soil, produces no crop. The parable finds a no less correct application in the different categories of spiritists as well. It is not a symbol of those who are interested only in the physical phenomenon, but derive nothing of consequence from them because they see them as nothing more than an object of curiosity. Those who seek nothing but the wonder in spirit communication, who are interested in them only to the extent that they satisfy their imagination, but who, after having received them, remain as cold and indifferent as they were in the first place? Who finds the counsels to be very good and admirable, yet apply them only to others and not to themselves? And lastly, for those whom the teachings are like the seeds that fall on good soil and yield a crop. So basically, what Allan Kardec and what the Spirit of Truth is saying is like, listen, y'all need to work on yourselves. You have to work on yourselves so that the messages that you are receiving from Spirit, whether it's through Spiritism, whether it's through the Bible, whether it's through Islam, whether it's whatever, wherever you get your divine inspiration from, if you do not work on yourself, you are reducing your chances of fully understanding and fully digesting what you are being exposed to, right? Because that is the limits of the physical. The physical has limits. So the more you take care of the physical, it begins to then leak into the emotional. It then leaks into the mental, and then it leaks into the spirit, and vice versa. And this sort of exchange, right? This infinity exchange of you taking care of the outside, which then allows for the outside to perceive the inside. And then the inside takes care of the outside because of the divine inspiration that is being brought in due to the open awareness that she did from the outside, etc. And it just keeps going and going and going. This is what they're talking about. And so if you come to Spiritism, or if you come to mediumship, or Spiritismo, from the perspective of just wanting to communicate with spirits and just wanting to go to a misa or a spiritist development circle, or just wanting to have the theatrics of encountering, these energies and these experiences, and you take nothing else from Spiritism, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. That's what they're saying here. They're also saying that, okay, let's say you put aside your desire for spirits and that just happens to be a happy plus. Even still, if you take the messages of the doctrines and you don't apply it to yourself, but you expect everyone else to apply it, but you're not applying it to yourself, then you did not learn a damn thing. So that's the whole point, right? So that's what they're calling you to do if this is your path. But I think it's a great approach to do in whatever spiritual path you're on, right? So now we're getting into the part of the chapter where the spirits talk, right? So there's going to be a spirit who talks on each particular topic, right? So this topic is called duty. And the spirit who is going to be speaking on it is a spirit called Lazare, and he was quoted in Paris in 1863. And Lazare says, duty is an individual's moral obligation, first toward him or herself and toward others immediately thereafter. Duty is the law of life. It is found in the smallest details as well as in the loftiest acts. I want to speak here only about moral duty and not the type imposed by the professions of the physical world. In the order of sentiments, duty is very difficult to fulfill because it is contrary to the seductions of self-interest and the heart. Its victories have no witnesses, and its failures undergo no repression. People's inner duty is left to their free will. The sting of conscience, that guardian of inner rectitude, warns and upholds them, but it is held back, often powerless, before the sophistry of passion. Meaning, that little voice in your head that tells you what the right thing and the wrong thing is, right? And they're always encouraging you to do the right thing, right? It's saying here that sometimes your passions get the best of you and tell this little voice to shut up, right? So when faithfully obeyed, the duty of the heart uplifts people. But how is such a duty determined? Where does it begin? Where does it end? Duty begins precisely at the point in which you threaten your neighbor's happiness or peace of mind. And it ends at the limit you would not want to see surpassed regarding yourself. God created all humans equal regarding suffering. Small or great, ignorant or educated, they all suffer for the same reasons, so that each may judiciously determine the evil he or she might do. The same criterion, however, does not exist regarding the good, which is infinitely more varied in its expressions. Equality in the face of suffering is a sublime provision by God, who wishes that all his children, taught by common experience, do not commit evil, alleging ignorance of its effects. Duty is the practical summary of all moral speculation. It is the courage of the soul who confronts the distress of life's struggles. It is both strict and yielding, ready to adapt itself to diverse complications. It remains unbending before temptation. Persons who fulfill their duty love God more than they love other individuals, and they love others more than they love themselves. They are at the same time judge and slave in their own cause. Duty is the most beautiful laurel of reason and depends on it like a child depends on its mother. Humans must love duty not because it preserves them against life's evils. Humankind cannot shirk those, but because it provides the soul with the strength it needs for its development. Duty grows and radiates under a more elevated form at each of the higher stages of humanity. Individuals' moral obligation towards God never ceases, as they must reflect the virtues of the Eternal One, who does not accept an imperfect sketch, because he wants the beauty of his work to be resplendent before him. End quote. Ooh, child. Honestly, that was beautifully written. That really is. So this idea of duty, once again, let me just remind you, he's talking about spiritual duty, right? So we're not talking about jobs or work or anything like that, or hard labor or anything like that. However, let's clear something up though, right? So when you're living a spiritual life, everything you do is a spiritual practice. So even going to work, even doing hard labor, even babysitting, even driving, even picking up your dog shit in the park, it's all an act of spiritual expression, right? And so to be acutely aware of each movement that you make, each feeling that you have, and the consideration of everything and everyone around you, okay, is part of this duty that we're talking about. So I'm just kind of putting that out there. But what he's really saying here is that duty, no matter how hard it is, that your reaction to suffering, no matter how small or how big it is what helps to build your spiritual endurance, your spiritual stamina, your spiritual grit. This, engaging in duty, in dutiful spiritual acts, you are building up a resistance, if you will, to negative, evil, harmful energies. It's like you're pumping up your immune system hard body, because you're giving yourself habits, spiritual habits of doing the right thing. Because if given the choice, right, which we always have the choice, that free will is that angel devil thing on the shoulder thing, right? Like, we have that choice. That's there. It's always there. And a lot of times we do the easier thing, and usually the easier thing is not the best option. And what duty does is reminds us to stay the course, right? The act of duty. Okay. Okay, so now the next little category that a spirit is going to talk on is the subject of virtue. And we are going to be quoting the spirit of Francis Nicolas Madeleine, who was quoted in Paris in 1863. In its highest expression, virtue encompasses all the essential qualities that comprise the good person. To be good, charitable, hardworking, reasonable, and modest are the qualities of a virtuous individual. Unfortunately, they are frequently accompanied by small moral ills that tarnish and weaken them. Those who flaunt their virtues are not virtuous, since they lack the principal quality, which is modesty, and display the vice most contrary to it, which is pride. A virtue truly worthy of its name does not like to show itself off. One might divine it, but it hides itself in obscurity and flees from the admiration of the masses. Saint Vincent de Paul was virtuous. The praiseworthy priest of Ars was virtuous, and many others little known to the world, but known to God, all these individuals were unaware that they were virtuous. They allowed themselves to be carried along by the stream of their saintly inspirations and practiced the good with complete disinterestedness and self-forgetfulness. It is the virtue thus understood and practiced that I invite you, my children. It is to this truly Christian and truly Spiritist virtue that I advise you to devote yourselves. But keep from your hearts the thoughts of pride, vanity, and self-centeredness, which always tarnish the most beautiful qualities of virtue. Do not imitate those who set themselves up as models and who toot their own horn about their qualities, for all who are complacent enough to listen. This virtue of ostentation often hides a multitude of small turpitudes and obnoxious weaknesses. In principle, individuals who exalt themselves, who erect a statue to their own virtue, annul by this very act any real merit that they might have had. However, what I can say about those whose whole heart is to appear to be what they are not, I readily admit that individuals who practice the good feel an inner satisfaction at the bottom of their heart. But whenever such satisfaction is exteriorized in order to receive praise, it degenerates into self-centeredness. Oh, all of you whom the Spiritist faith has warmed with its rays, and who know how far humans are from perfection, do not yield to such folly. Virtue is a grace that I desire for all sincere Spiritists. But I will say to them, it's better to have less virtue with modesty than more with pride. For it is through pride that successive humanities have been lost, and it is through humility that they will someday be redeemed. End quote. I mean, I think he pretty much said it here. I don't really think I need to interpret this, right? I don't think I need to. I think this was a good one. But I will say this. A lot of times when I read passages like this, or when we talk about subjects where we tell people to kind of, tone it down, take it down a couple of notches, be humble, that often gets interpreted as, dimming someone's light or bringing them down, or, whatever the case. That is not necessarily what's happening. And again, it's all in context. It's all it's all circumstantial, but through this lens, what the spirit of Saint Francis Nicholas Madeline is saying is, you can be proud of yourself. You can have an inner satisfaction of what it is that you're doing and why it is that you're doing it, and the joy that you get from it, and the feeling that you get when you reminisce and you think about it. But what he's saying here is, the minute you make that into a parade, into something big and advertisey, it devalues it. That's really what he's saying. So by all means, praise yourself. Shout it to the rooftops to your fucking self, right? You good. You could do that. Go in the middle of the woods and be like, I am amazing. I encourage you. I think it's great. That's self-care right there. Okay, so now we're going to get into another spirit. And I'm this particular subject is probably going to get people tight, but let's talk about it. The title is Superiors and Subordinates. And the spirit who is speaking about this is once again Francis Nicholas Madeline. But this is him. He's using his title Cardinal Marlot here, 1863 in Paris. This was a certain part of his life. So we will see what he has to say about superiors and subordinates. Oh, Lord. Authority, as much as wealth, is a trust for which those who have been vested with it will have to render an accounting. Okay, before I go any further, can you please hear that again? Please, really quick. Authority, as much as wealth, is a trust for which those who have been vested with it, who have been given that authority and given that wealth, will have to render its accounting. Meaning, bitch, I need receipts. That's what that means. That's what that sentence means. If I'm entrusting you with a position of authority, if I'm saying to you that I choose you to be a leader, if I'm entrusting in you my tax dollars, I need a breakdown. I need a breakdown of the receipt. I want to know where every penny is going. I want to know. I want to know. How are you leading? How are you using your authority? I want to know. That's what that first sentence is. And in the Spiritist point of view, they're going to account for it. Whether you see that accounting or not, don't worry about it, in God's hands, right? Don't worry about it. They're going to account for it, okay? So now we can move on. Sorry, I had to get that off my chest. So do not think that it is given to them to provide them with the vain pleasure of command, nor should you be like most of those power holders of the earth who wrongly believe that it is a right, a property. God, meanwhile, provides them with proof enough that it is neither, for he takes it from them at will. If it were a privilege inherited to them, it would be an inalienable one. However, no one can say that something belongs to them when it can be taken without their consent. God gives authority either as a mission or a trial when he deems it appropriate, and takes it away in the same manner. All those who are trustees of authority, to whatever extent, from masters over their servants to sovereigns over their people, should not forget the fact that it is souls who are under their charge, that they will answer for the good and bad guidance they have given to their subordinates, and that the wrongs their subalterns might commit and the vices to which they might yield as a result of such guidance or bad examples will fall upon them. Whereas they will reap the fruits of their kindness for leading them to good. All people on earth have a mission, great or small, whatever it may be. It is always given for the purpose of goodness. And to deviate it from its principle, therefore, is to fail in its fulfilling of it. If God asks the wealthy, what have you done with the wealth that is in your hands? Should you have been a source for spreading prosperity all around you? He will ask those who possess some degree of authority, what have you done with this authority? What evils have you prevented? What progress have you fostered? If I have given you subordinates, it was not so that you could make them slaves to your will or tame instruments for your whims or your greed. I made you a strong and entrusted you with those who were weak in order to uphold them and help them ascend to me. Superiors who conform to the words of Christ despise none of those who are beneath them, for they know that social distinctions mean nothing before God. Spiritism teaches them that if their subordinates obey them today, they might have commanded them in the past or might do so in the future. Because again, we believe in reincarnation. Spiritists believe in reincarnation. So the same, and we also believe that we tend to be born around spirits and souls of the same level of progression, right? If superiors have duties to fulfill, subordinates on their part have theirs also, and they are no less sacred. If the latter are spiritists, their conscience will tell them even more strongly that they are not exempt from their duties, even when their superiors fail to fulfill theirs. Because spiritists know that one must not repay evil with evil, and that the wrongs of some do not authorize the wrongs of others. If their position entails suffering, they tell themselves that they must assuredly and must have warranted it. because they perhaps abused their authority in the past and must in turn feel the improprieties they made others suffer. If they are forced to endure such a position because they cannot find a better one, Spiritism teaches them to resign themselves to it as a trial for the humility needed for their advancement. Their belief guides their conduct, and they act as they would want their subordinates to act towards them if they were the boss. For this reason, they are more scrupulous in fulfilling their obligations, since they understand that any negligence in the work that has been entrusted to them is harmful to those who pay them and to whom they owe their time and efforts. In other words, Spiritists abide by the sentiment of duty that their faith gives them, along with the certainty that any detour from that straight and narrow will be a debt that will have to be paid sooner or later. So this is another reason why caste systems work, right? This idea of duty is kind of a similar concept as someone's dharma, right? So it's this idea of you have to participate in the world, whatever your role is, whatever circumstance you were born into. That role that your spirit is playing, because that's what it is. It's a role. You're coming into a type of life, right? It's to play the shit out of that role, right? You're gonna live that life to the best of your ability, always in pursuit of God, right? Now, this is tough. That's a tough pill to swallow, right? This is why this particular chapter tends to really ruffle a lot of feathers. But remember, we talked about this way, way, way earlier in the book, right? We talked about this idea of, people being born into, abusive situations, or people being born with already predispositions to certain addictions and drugs or health issues, or people who were just born in the wrong places at the wrong time. That somehow this particular thought frame says that they deserve that. And that's not what's being said here. It's not about deserving. It's not about vengeance. It's not about any of that. It's about progression. And so, it's really, really tough for a lot of people to get that without, and it's also tough for people to explain it without sounding so dismissive of the suffering that's happening in this world, because it is real, and no one should be speaking on it unless you've lived that life. You know what I mean? You can't tell someone that the life that the circumstances that they were brought into, which was against them from the start, is some sort of duty that they must engage in for their progression. You can't say that to someone. That's just fucking crazy. But these are some of the ideas. Take that or leave that. I tend to have an issue with it. I tend to not really hold on to that piece too hard, mainly because the majority of my life and my job and the work that I do involves working with disenfranchised, marginalized people who are in very, very desperate situations. And you will never see me saying that to them. Never, never, never in a million years. Never. All right. We are approaching the second to last spirit, I think it is. Yes, the second to last spirit before the chapter is over. Now, this spirit is going to talk about the individual in the world. And the spirit's name is, he does not have a name. They call him the protector spirit. And they quoted this in Bordeaux, France in 1863. A sentiment of compassion must always animate the hearts of those who gather under the Lord's sight and implore the assistance of good spirits. Therefore, purify your heart, Do not let any mundane or futile thought linger in it. Lift up your spirit to those you are calling, so that finding in you the proper dispositions, they may profusely sow the seed that should germinate in your soul and produce within it the fruit of charity and justice. There's something really important in that first paragraph that links us all the way back to the very first book, the Spirits book, right? Your spirits, or the spirits that you attempt to encounter or interact with, right, will not come or be attracted to you, especially if you don't know their names and you're just kind of like inviting whatever. The ones that will show up are the ones that are more closely attuned to the frequency that you are radiating out. Okay, we talked about this in this very first spirit book. Now, the spirit book is kind of like the science, if you will, the metaphysical science behind spirit and the anatomy of spirit and mediums and how they do their thing. And they talk about this. They talk about how spirits will come to those who sort of vibrate at the same wavelength, right? And so when you are seeking to speak to higher spirit guides, more elevated spirit guides, you yourself need to come into that space, need to come into those prayers, need to come into the whatever in a higher vibration. Like, you have to come in with a better mood, you have to come in with a lighter spirit. You want to kind of be cleansed, if you will, so that you vibrate high enough so that those spirits can manifest and make themselves known. Because remember, in the spirits book, the spirits require energy to manifest and to interact, and the energy that they're going to take is yours, right? But if you're not vibing at their level, they can't, there's nothing to latch on to. Okay? Anywho, let's keep it moving. Therefore, do not think that in incessantly exhorting you to pray and mental evocation, we wish to advise you to live a mystical life that keeps you outside the laws of the society in which you have been condemned to live. No, 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 no. Live with the men and women of your time in the way that men and women should live, and surrender to the necessities, even the frivolities of the day, but do it with a sentiment of purity, which may sanctify them. Meaning, bitch, cleanse space. Whatever room you walk into, bitch, cleanse it. Cleanse that space by simply being yourself. Engage in the world. Meet new people. Have experiences. By all means, they're telling you to really do it all. Do it all. But you do so from a place of grace and purity. And by doing so, you sanctify space and you heal those around you. And people around you have two options. They either get mad uncomfortable and they fucking leave, or they have no choice but to raise their vibration as well to meet you there because it feels so good. You know what I'm saying? You have been called to enter into contact with spirits of different natures and opposite characters. Do not clash with any of those with whom you might find yourself. Be cheerful, be happy, be of the cheerfulness provided by a clear conscience, of the happiness of the heirs of heaven, counting the days that will draw them nearer to you, to their inheritance. Virtue does not consist in assuming a stern and gloomy face and rejecting the pleasures that your human conditions allow. It is sufficient to report all the actions of your life to the Creator who has given you such a life. It is sufficient when one begins or finishes a deed to lift one's thought to the Creator and ask Him in an impulse of the soul for His watch care to succeed or for His blessing once finished. In all that you do, look to the source of all things. Never do anything without the thought of God purifying and sanctifying your acts. This is yet another reason why we engage in things like prayer before we eat, right? or why we say prayer before bed, or why we would, bless something, right? It's this idea that, everything you do, everything you touch, every person you engage with is an opportunity for you to sanctify, for you to uplift, and for you to then give away to God, right? So as Christ had said, perfection is found entirely in the practice of absolute charity, but the duties of charity extend to all social positions, from the lowest to the highest, and those who live in isolation would have no charity to practice. It is only through contact with their fellow beings in the most arduous struggles that they find an opportunity to practice it. Thus, those who isolate themselves intentionally deprive themselves of the most powerful means of perfection, since they have only themselves to think of. Their lives are those of a selfish person. Do not imagine, therefore, that in order to live in constant communication with us, to live in the Lord's sight, you must fasten like a cliche and cover yourselves with ashes. No, no, no. And once more, no. Be happy in accordance with the needs of humankind, but may your happiness never hold a thought or commit an action that might offend God, or anything that might or could that might cloud the face of those who love and guide you. God is love, and he blesses all those who love virtuously. Shoot. All right, we're on our last little part, and it's really short. And the topic that this particular spirit is going to talk about is called caring for the body and the spirit. And the spirit talking is Jorge. Jorge, a protector spirit, but it's not Jorge as in like the Spanish Jorge. It's Jorge as in the French Jorge. So it's with a G. Spelt like George's. Anyway, 1863. Does moral perfection consist in the mortification of the body? In order to resolve this question, I will rely on elementary principles, and I will begin by demonstrating the need for caring for the body, which, according to the alternatives of health and infirmity, influences in a very important way the soul, which must be regarded as a prisoner in the flesh. In order for this prisoner to live, move about, and even conceive of the illusion of freedom, the body must be sound, of good disposition, and vigorous. So let us establish a comparison, supposing that the body and soul are both in a perfect state. What should they do to maintain the balance between their aptitudes and needs so different in nature? Here two systems confront each other. That of the aesthetics, who want to bring down the body, and that of the materialists, who want to bring down the soul. Two forms of violence, each almost as foolish as the other. And alongside these two large groups swarm the countless multitudes of the indifferent, who with neither conviction nor compassion, love with tepidness, and sparing with their joys. Where then is the wisdom? Where then is the science of living? Nowhere. And this big problem would have remained entirely unsolved if Spiritism had not come to assist those who study the issue by showing them the relationship between the body and the soul, and to tell them that since they are necessary for each other, both must be cared for. So, love your soul, but care also for your body, the soul's instrument. Being heedless of the needs that are indicated by nature itself means to be heedless of the law of God. Do not punish your body for the wrongs that your free will has made it commit, and for which it is no more responsible than a badly ridden horse for any accident it might cause. Hence, Will you be more perfect if you torture your body but remain no less selfish and proud, no more charitable toward your neighbor? No. Perfection does not lie in this. It lies entirely in the reforms to which you submit your spirit. Discipline it, subjugate it, humiliate it, and mortify it. That is the way to make it docile to God's will and the only way that leads to perfection. Bitch, I don't know about you, but subjugated and humiliated, not on my list. Not on my list of working with the body. Definitely not. Discipline, yes. Definitely. You got to give your body good habits. You got to give yourself discipline. You got to like work yourself for sure. Because the physical body is always going to go for what is easy. It is always going to go for what tastes good. It's always going to go for what feels good. It always going to go. I mean, the physical body is very, very predictable. And that predictability is good when it comes to surviving out there in nature. But those base actions are not necessary when you're trying to evolve the spirit. They're just not, because the spirit is not dealing with the same problems that the physical deals with. It deals with a whole nother level of problems. And so there's a time to sort of take this body and say, I'm going to love you, but I got to set some boundaries. I'm going to engage in self-care and I'm going to treat you, but I got to set some boundaries, right? So, and you can do that. It's completely within your free will. So we are done with chapter 17. We are now open to questions if you have any. You know, I always love doing this. I love reading for you guys. Ay, bendiciones. Hello. Hi, Selma. Hello. Those of you who are in TikTok, say hello. I would love to give you a shout out. Hello. Okay, no questions? Beautiful. That either means that I'm a really good teacher or something, or like you guys are like super smart and you didn't even need me, or like it's a little bit of both. So I'm going to take the latter. I'm going to take the last option. Hi, Pocket Art. And of course, Selma, I'm always here for you, girl. You just email me. Oh, thank you. Facebook user, whoever said I was an amazing teacher, throw your name in the chat box, because right now it's just showing up as a Facebook user. So I don't know who you are, and I want to give you some loving for saying that. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, beautiful, Zelma. Thank you so much. So I'm actually going to be sending out an email to my website subscribers, which you are a part of, I know. I'm going to be sending that email on Sunday, and it explains sort of the changes and things that have been going on within my life and how I have to kind of rearrange my schedule now. So one of the changes that you are going to be seeing is that moving forward, I will not be having my interviews on This Is How We Grow podcast. Those interviews are not going to be on Sundays anymore. They are most likely either going to be earlier on Sunday or on a Wednesday or a Thursday. I have not quite yet ironed that out. And the book club, which is this, in all honesty, until I get 2 more things confirmed, it's going to be random. Sorry. Like tonight, I just so happen to have like 2 hours that I can spend. So I'm like, I'm going to come online and do the book club. So I'm waiting on these 2 things to be confirmed, and they should be confirmed before Sunday, which is why I was waiting to send that email out. So just to kind of keep you guys in the loop, hopefully that made sense. Hello. Those of you who are on TikTok who are not on my email subscription, go to my website, www.themagicalsolution.com. Subscribe to my email list so that you can stay up to date, so that you can read blogs, very helpful information, so that you can watch interviews with really amazing authors and elders and influencers in our spiritual community. Um, Share and all that good stuff. All right, no questions, no questions. Beautiful. All right, guys. So you enjoy your Friday night. Have fun. Don't do nothing crazy, but have fun. And hopefully, I will see you guys soon. Thank you so much. Make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. And remember, this is how we grow, guys. Have a good night.